Stimulus bill is out as it appears ready to be passed by the House of Representatives. It is 591 pages long. Hey everyone, me Kevin here. In this video, we are going to go through the actual text of the $1,400 stimulus check section. In future videos, I will break down the other sections like the child tax credits, unemployment, rental assistance, and we'll go through to see what kind of changes there are. But for now, let's just talk about the stimulus checks. All right, folks, let's jump right into it. But first, I have to remind you that if you're interested in checking out cryptocurrency, if you're thinking about buying some cryptocurrency, you can get up to $250 totally for free by going to metkevin.com/BF. That stands for BlockFi. metkevin.com/BF, and you can get up to $250 totally for free when you deposit money to basically buy cryptocurrency with BlockFi. On page 454, we will find the details for the $1,400 stimulus check. As usual, this will be a tax credit, and this will be a tax credit against your 2021 tax return. Of course, if you don't file and you're on SSI, SSDI, VA, or railroad retirement benefits, you do not have to file. You are an eligible non-filer. But let's get into the nitty-gritty here. So the rebate amount, as expected, will be $1,400, and this is the bill as it's been put together. It just got released today by the House of Representatives. $1,400 if you're single, $2,800 if you are filing a joint return. Plus, you will get $1,400 multiplied by the number of dependents you have. Now, that means all dependents, not child dependents, it means all. So if you have an 80-year-old adult dependent or a 20-year-old college student dependent or a 5-year-old child dependent, as long as they are your dependent, they are eligible to get a $1,400 stimulus check for you because it goes to you. Whoever's filing is the one getting the stimulus check. Now, an eligible recipient, this is a little bit different from the second stimulus check. The difference here is any non-resident alien is not eligible. So if you do not have a social security number, in other words, you are not eligible for a stimulus check. You must have a social security number. There is one exception we'll talk about in a moment. If you are a dependent and you're filing your own taxes, but you're being claimed as a dependent on somebody else's taxes, you will also not get a stimulus check. Or if you are an estate or a trust, which you're not, because you wouldn't be listening to this since you're inanimate, you're not eligible either. But that's because social security numbers or tax identification numbers can be issued to estates and trusts. Now, limitations. So basically what's going to happen is once you reach certain thresholds, the amount of the check you get will go to zero. And they're going to do that proportionally. So basically what that means is if you're a single filer, once you make over $75,000, the amount of your check will start going down. And once you make an additional $25,000, in other words, once you hit $100,000, you will go to $0 of eligible stimulus money. No matter how many dependents you have, you can have 20 children and be eligible for like $28,000 of stimulus checks. Is that right? 1,400? Yeah, it is. You'd be eligible for $1,400 times 20. That's $28,000 of stimulus checks plus your own. You would not get it. As soon as your income hits $100,000, it'll go to zero. If your income is halfway between $75,000 and $100,000, you should expect to get roughly half of your stimulus check. They're basically saying it's just going to scale from $75,000 to $100,000, going to zero. That's the phase out. That's the new phase out, and that's different from prior stimulus check phase outs. If you are a head of household, you will get 100% of what you're eligible for at $112,500, but after an additional $37,500, so once you hit $150,000, you go to a hard zero. And if you are filing jointly, as soon as you hit $150,000 for joint filers, you will begin to lose your stimulus check benefits, and those will go to zero once you hit $200,000 of income. Now, here's the tax identification number requirement. You have to have a social security number in order to be eligible. If there is no valid social security number listed on your tax return, you will get $0, or that person who doesn't have a social listed gets zero. So if it's you and your spouse and you have 3 children and you never applied for a social for them, you get $0 for the 3 children. But if you both have socials, you would get it. Now, joint returns, in the case of joint returns, $2,800 is being treated as such that you will get $1,400 if only one spouse has a tax return. So this is good because there were cases previously where a family might have an ITIN spouse and then the entire family was not eligible. But here they're basically saying, hey, as long as one of you has it, you'll still get that $1,400 for the spouse. And dependents, they will only be included if they have a valid Social Security number listed on the tax return. In theory, the way this is written, and I would verify this, but in theory, the way this is written is if both parents do not have a social, let's say they use an ITIN, but the children do have socials, technically, the way this looks like it's written, the children would be eligible for a stimulus check, which would go to the filer, just the way this is written. So it seems like everything is being tied directly to Social Security numbers. For adoption purposes, in the case of a dependent who is adopted or placed for adoption, the term valid identification number shall include adoption taxpayer identification number. Special rule for members of the armed forces. This rule that you have to have a social will not apply where at least one spouse was a member of the armed forces of the United States at any time during the taxable year, and the valid identification number of at least one spouse is included. So as long as one spouse has a Social Security number and was included on that tax return and one of them was in the military, boom, you are eligible for a stimulus check. All right, let's move forward to some of the other sections here. This tax credit is refundable, which means even if you have 0 income, you still get to take advantage of getting this stimulus check. Then any individual who passed away before January 1, 2021 basically will not be eligible for a stimulus check. They'll be treated as basically having no Social Security number that is valid. Now, if someone passed away and they were in the military, the person who passed away was in the military, then the other spouse can still get treated as being eligible for a stimulus check. Now, in order to determine whether or not you are eligible for the stimulus check, the IRS is going to look at your 2019 tax return unless you've already filed your 2020 tax return and that tax return has been accepted by the IRS. So as soon as your tax return is accepted by the IRS and the IRS or Treasury Department says, okay, let's send you a stimulus check, they're going to go with your 2020 tax return. If they look to check if you're eligible for a check before your tax return actually gets accepted, they're going to use your 2019 data. This sets up some interesting scenarios because basically, if your income went down in 2020, then there's a chance maybe you weren't eligible for a stimulus check in 2019, but you are eligible in 2020. If you rush to file your taxes, maybe you'll get your stimulus check early if your tax return gets in and accepted before the stimulus checks start coming out. If you miss that deadline and you're eligible for your 2020 stimulus check, but your income was too high and they read off your 2019 eligibility, then you will get your stimulus check on your 2020, well, you'll get it in 2022 when you file your 2021 taxes. So you'll get it next spring, basically. So there's an incentive if your income declined to file your taxes sooner. If, however, your income went up in 2020, and let's say you were eligible for a check in 2019, but you're not anymore because of your 2020 income, you might be tempted to wait to file your tax return. And this is, of course, for the stimulus check purposes. Most of the child tax credits, for example, those are all beginning on your next year's tax return anyway. So your 2021 tax return. So those don't have anything to do with your 2020s anyway. Now, if you've received a stimulus check debit card, this section here says payments made by the secretary to individuals under this section shall not be in the form of an increase in the balance of any previously issued debit card, prepaid debit card. So in other words, they do not plan to reload the debit cards, which honestly, 3 stimulus checks, it kind of seems like a waste that they're not reloading them, but that's how it works. Another question that comes up has to do with garnishments. And basically, bottom line, they're saying no garnishments. They say right here that any refund payable by reason of, well, the rules of the stimulus check shall not be subject to reduction or offset pursuant to the following sections here, which you're welcome to look these up and you should look these up to verify yourself. But my understanding of this is no, you can't get any stimulus check withheld for administrative claims, administrative debts, child support, federal debts, state debts, unemployment debts. Now, it's very likely that also means that banks can't garnish your money. I'm not 100% sure on that. That's what they used in the language last time. Those sections are so legalese difficult. I'm going to go with the assumption that banks can't garnish either, especially since they're making it very clear that they do not want any other garnishments to apply. Interestingly, there's also no mention of the word prison or incarcerated or incarceration in the stimulus check language that I can find. And I looked for it, so technically, if you're in prison, this bill kind of implies you would be eligible for a stimulus check. Now, I want to verify that because sometimes, Command F can miss something, although I try really hard to find it. So from what I can tell, people in prison are not excluded from this one. So that's just what I'm seeing right now. So for those of you wondering, okay, Kevin, when the heck is it going to come? Well, right now the Senate is planning to get this bill passed by March 14th, which is crazy because that feels like another 3.5 weeks away at this point. If they pass it by March 14th, which is kind of slow, then technically we should be able to start seeing stimulus checks go out via direct deposit within the next week. Some people last time were really lucky and they got the stimulus check within a week. Some people got them within the first 2 weeks. The vast majority of people started seeing the checks somewhere between 2 to 6 weeks out through deposit or the mail. That would mean most of us are probably going to see these checks arrive in the month of April. And the lucky people with direct deposit and no issues at all with the government, like nothing getting caught up or snagged at all, they're going to get it within the first 2 weeks afterwards. So sometime between the Ides of March and the end of March. But hey, if you set your expectations for the end of March to mid-April, that's probably going to be the average if this bill gets passed, which right now, Democrats have enough control to get this passed, and it looks like it'll go through. The minimum wage, however, that remains to be seen. Anyway, if you found this helpful, consider sharing this video. Thank you so much for watching. Go to metkevin.com/BF to open up a BlockFi cryptocurrency account and get up to $250 for free. Get your life insurance in as little as 5 minutes, by the way. You don't have to talk to anyone. You simply go to metkevin.com.